along comes a guy he's a professor at the school. He's the only drama teacher. Generally what he's doing are like Greek plays and that kind of stuff. He decides to get a PhD. So he leaves and they replace him with a tentatively just part-time, you're here until this guy comes back. And the guy's name's Fred Adams, right? He'd been a Delta, raised had gone to school at BYU, loved theater since he was a kid. His parents had inculcated him with the stories of Shakespeare. He knew more about Shakespeare as a young kid. I mean, he didn't know fairy tales like Goldilocks and the Three Bears, but he could talk to you about Midsummer Night's Dream. So he's committed to that. He's also a lover of theater. He wanted to be an actor, but it didn't work out for him. And so he comes to be a teacher of theater, comes to fill this guy's spot. At the same time, the auditorium is built, which is a huge, beautiful, 1950s building, so there's this great theater space involved. So what Fred does is he begins bringing Broadway theater, like musical theater, to here. And he's the first one to bring Fiddler on the Roof to come to this area. He gets the rights to do it. It's a big deal.
About what year did he come here?
He gets here in the 50s.
Okay.
Right? I don't remember off the top of my head. I'd have to look it up. But in the 50s, or early 60s, but more in the 50s, late 50s. And so he begins thinking about there's not a way to, it's expensive, right?
Yeah.
Rights are expensive.
Right.
We had done a couple things of Shakespeare, but he says, well, I'll think about doing Shakespeare because I don't have to pay any royalties and we have to do some costuming. So he puts on a Shakespeare, I think it's Romeo and Juliet, hugely popular.
Wow.
Like, I mean, they have to open new nights. And this is from a drama program that oftentimes you would buy a ticket and you'd show up and they'd say, oh, we decided not to do it. Right.
I didn't even think about the fact that not having to pay the royalties would have an impact on what's selected. Yeah.
That's one of the reasons why Shakespeare's so popular.
Yeah.
Right. Is because theaters don't have to pay to do it. So this phenomenal success of Romeo and Juliet is he says there's a community out there that'll make it work. In fact, he was worried when he first did this because he didn't have not a lot of guys in the drama program.
Oh.
So he went to the football coach and said, I need some guys. And the football coach says, who wants to help Fred out? And so the first actors were these football players, right? So this is before the festival. He then has a friend that's pregnant that needs some help up in Ashland, Oregon. He goes there to the Oregon Shakespeare Festival where he befriends Angus Bomer, who's the founder. And Angus Bomer really just takes Fred in. Like, he's a brilliant mentor, talks about the festival, talks about how it's done, lets Fred take notes and all this other kind of stuff. So he comes back. And at the time, Fred is engaged to a woman named Barbara Gaddy. And they're really, again, thinking about how do we stay? Because there's no promise that when this other guy comes back that I'm still going to have a job.
Yeah.
But he's shown that this drama, that there's a love of Shakespeare here.
Right.
But again, we'd only done it 3 times in its whole history before Fred does it.
Wow.
So what he does is the story is used to be a laundromat on, I think it's First West, called the Fluffy Bundle. There's a historical marker there now. It's a parking lot now. And he and Barbara are put their laundry in and they go out and sit in Fred's car and begin thinking about reasons to stay. And they've been thinking about what are the similarities between Ashland and Cedar City. And they're both close to national parks. They're both rural areas. They're both linked to a university. So Fred says, well, if it's going to work there, why won't it work here? And that's the beginnings of what will become known as the Utah Shakespeare Festival. I mean, there's lots of other, ins and outs to how it actually is what it is. But this is where it all starts, is that Fred thinking, we got to do this. Is be a great thing to do. We can bring people here to see these amazing things. He's not just thinking about ways to make Shakespeare look better or the university look better, but how do we get people to come to Cedar City and explore these environments? Because if they come to see the festival, which will only be a weekend or 2, then they'll come and they'll stay an extra day to eat and to see a national park. And at the same time, think about I-15 coming down, right? He's thinking about ways to bring more people into Cedar City.
Yeah. And